Good morning, artist. Today we're going to get started with a one-point perspective drawing that will be a city from a bird's eye view. So the first step of any one-point perspective drawing is putting my vanishing point in the middle of the paper. There it is. Most important part of this, without that vanishing point, this is not one-point perspective. So pay attention to how I always line up with that point. Now I'm drawing very lightly what will end up being sort of the main street that goes down the center of my city. Ta-da! And now I'm going to draw some of my buildings. So what I'm drawing are shapes to be the buildings, and it's the roof that you're looking down on. I want to have at least 4 above my road and 4 below my road. So I don't want them to be right on the street. The closer to the street they are, the shorter the buildings are going to look. And I want this to be like a really big city with big, tall skyscrapers. So I'm just kind of using my ruler here. And I'm going to draw some rectangles. I think that'll be one. I'm actually going to have this building have sort of like a tower attached to it. So adding one over here. And you notice I'm always using my ruler here. It's very important to use your ruler when you do perspective drawing. So I've got that one. Let's see. Ooh, I want to do kind of a fun shape building. I want it to be like a letter C. So like the roof of it is going to be like that. I'm going to draw some edges going in. And I like this idea because it's going to have kind of a courtyard situation. And I'm just, you know, looking around for random circles to trace, or you can always use a compass. I think for the inside part, I'm just going to need to freehand this. So sort of a roundish building. Maybe I'm going to have one more over here. I'm just going to keep it kind of a standard rectangle. I always like to draw very light with my pencil until I know that things are as I'm going to keep them later. So there's my 4 above, and then below, let's see. I'm going to have a building that is, I want it to be like at an angle over here. Like that. I want another weird shaped one. I think this one is going to have, I don't know, sort of an L shape situation. It's going to be shorter because it's closer to the road. Let's see. And then maybe just some kind of square ones that are going to be, they're really far back here. So that tells me that they are either going to be far back from the street or they are really, really tall towers. I kind of see them as being really tall towers, like tall apartment building type things. So buildings. Okay. So now what I need to do is connect the corners of my buildings to my vanishing point. So that's going to be the sides of the building you see receding. So I'm going to start here, and then I'll probably go into fast forward mode for the rest of this. So I find a corner and I make sure I'm lined up with my vanishing point. I'm going to draw a line. Corner, vanishing point. Every time I'm checking that my ruler is lined up with both. And so this one, so corner, vanishing point, lined it up, corner, vanishing point, lined it up. And if I have one that, like this sort of rounded building, actually this one, it looks like I'm mostly going to find the corners. So depending on where your corners are, you might have rounded edges you line up, all different kind of stuff. I'm going to fast forward through the rest of this. Okay, so I have all of my corners and edges of my buildings connected to my vanishing point right here in the center. One thing to notice is that some of these, like for example, over here, when I started to connect this line up with my vanishing point, I ran into another building. If ever in 1-point perspective, I run into another line, I stop the line there. You never draw a line through another line. Okay, so my next step now is I need to make it so it does not, so these buildings look like they're on the ground, not all shooting out of one sewer hole in the middle of the road. So this is the part that can be slightly tricky. I'm going to go ahead and hopefully zoom in here so we can focus on this area. So I've got this building here, and I see that the top of the building is a diagonal line. I want the bottom of my building to always be a parallel line to the top. So if parallel lines, they are the same distance apart. They never get closer together or further apart. So the way that I can do this with my ruler is I just line up the line I have there, and then I drag it down a little bit. And I draw another line down here. See? Parallel lines. If I have a corner, such as I do in this building, it has one more step. So again, line it up, drag my ruler down, draw a parallel line in that space. And now for the other side, because if the top of this building is a right angle, so is the bottom. And I want to make sure the corners of my building line up. So there we go. Top of the building, bottom of the building. I'm gonna zoom on back out now so you can see me do this with the rest of my buildings. The only one here that's going to be not just drawing a parallel line will be this one that's rounded, because the inside of the rounded part, so parallel line, this inside part, since this is a curve, the inside is going to be a curve. You're just going to see kind of like that down there, just sort of a similar curve. Okay, I'm going to go into fast forward mode and do this now. All right, so I have the bottoms of all my buildings drawn. Some of them, like this one over here, I decided to make them all like one big thing that connects. Seemed kind of fun. It's like a multi-height tower situation. The other thing that I did was, after I drew the bottoms of those lines, I went ahead and erased all that extra stuff. That's why it's really good to draw light for the first part of this, because I was able to erase it and it's basically gone. I still do want to keep track of where my vanishing point is though, because I'm going to need that later. So the next thing that we're going to do is add in a few more streets and stuff to get around this city. You don't need to have a ton of detail yet, because we are going to come back in and actually crop this paper. So I wouldn't spend a ton of time on details, but I do like to add in some streets at this point. So the way I would do that, I mean, I have my main street and I can just use my ruler. I can have some streets that go off of my main street. I can even do things like maybe there's like a driveway kind of thing in front of this building that's diagonal at the corner. Sometimes like in between these two, I feel like there's going to be a road that goes there, but it's partly blocked. So I can have that happening. It just sort of disappears. And then I'm also going to have this road kind of go a little bit behind. Right now, by creating these areas of overlapping, you're going to make that three-dimensional space more believable. So over here, I mean, that's sort of a main road, but there's not a lot of room in here. So I feel like this is just going to be maybe a real skinny little driveway or something like that. Maybe there'll be a parking lot back there. I think this is just crying out to be a fountain that sort of matches that shape. So I'm just sort of adding in different roads and ways to get around. If you're not sure what to add here. A great thing to do is actually pull up Google Maps and go to satellite view and look at a really big city. So you can kind of see what does all this stuff look like from above. I think for now, that is good. I'm going to come back in a minute and I'm going to crop my drawing. Once I have drawn the bottoms of all of my buildings and added in a few details of roads, I'm actually going to crop my image. The reason that we crop it is having something as simple as the main road going at a diagonal makes it look really, really more interesting and dynamic. So you're going to take one of my magical measuring devices here, like this one, and really all I need you to do is mark the corners, including what you want to include and leaving out what you want to leave out. And then once you've got this, you're going to deliver it to me and I will go ahead and crop it for you on the paper cutter. So I will be back with my cropped paper. I have a cropped paper now and I'm going to show you how to add details on your building. A successful one-point perspective bird's eye view drawing is going to have details in perspective on at least half of your buildings. So this is when having that vanishing point left over is super, super important, because if I'm going to draw windows, for example, on this building here, your windows are going to line up with your vanishing point. So I'm just sort of drawing in some vertical lines for my windows there. And my horizontal lines are really going to line up with the top and bottom of my building. So just drawing squares or rectangles on a building is not actually in one-point perspective and not what we're looking for here. You want the details on your building, whatever you have. If they're on these side pieces, they need to go towards your vanishing point. So you can do what I did right there, or maybe on this weird, tall, skinny one, which in my mind is like a really, really tall building of fancy, fancy luxury apartments full of windows, but the windows are actually going to be divided up a bit. I've got this, so I've got my verticals. I'm going to draw in some quick horizontal lines. So kind of like what I did on the last one, making sure they're always parallel to the top and bottom of the building. And, you know, maybe there are individual window panes, and the way I know how to draw those is they're inside of these squares. Like that. So, I'm going to add some details to this and then come back and check in about shading and coloring.